I have this ability to irritate everyone on the editing team. Like if I don't want this, I don't want this. There are problems. If there are problems with the cover page, then no. If I want to include the names of the countries, even though if you think that there are stereotypes, if I don't want to give you editing rights, then no. So you also have the ability to endure that. So thank you so much.
Hi everyone, welcome to this interesting discussion, podcast, or interview, whatever you can call it. Today we have a very special guest with us. I honestly don't know how to introduce you. Should I say you're a friend? Should I say you're somebody who I've learned a lot from? Should I say you are one of the most imaginative authors I've met? Or should I say that we share a publisher author bond? But today, this discussion is with somebody from whom, in the process of writing, I have learned a lot. From this podcast, we will try to share the same learning with you. Welcoming on our podcast, Arya Desai. Hi, Arya, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Okay, straight to the topic. Tell me about yourself first. मतलब थोड़ा तो background देना पड़ेगा ना?
Okay, so I'm Arya Desai. I live in Ahmedabad in Gujarat, and I love reading books. It's my hobby, it's my passion, and even writing's my passion. Creative writing, writing stories, all of that. I started it from like imagining. So I used to sit at the top of a door in my house in the garden and like keep on imagining stuff. And then my mother would come and like force me to go out and play. And then one day, like one fine day, we just started writing. She just tested me like, what are you actually doing sitting over there? And then she found out that I had the plot for something good. So then I started penning down my first story.
Okay. So, the whole journey of the book, we will definitely come to it and we will definitely talk about it. But before that, I want to know, what do you think as a writer? You said you were imagining things and you were just putting them together. The story that you've written and both the sequences of it are really detailed in terms of thinking. What is your thinking process as a writer?
So there's this book, The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. So I read that, and it has a lot of insights as to the plot, as to how you should describe it, as to what should come first and last, the status quo, the conclusion, the plot, the assistance. So I don't take that as my advice. I take that as the things I'm not supposed to do, that I should refrain from, because my writing should go out of the way. So it shouldn't be like the mediocre writing that everybody reads. So I try to go out of the way. And also in my character in Mencius, I reflect myself.
Interesting.
So then I can actually put in what I would think at that moment. From my perspective, I can write what Mencius feels.
So a lot of people believe that fiction is very much taken from reality. How much is your fiction taken from reality?
I guess all the fiction novelists would know this, that when we write, it's a reflection of our own lives.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't literally fight Voldemort or anything,
Correct.
But then we have similar challenges in our life that we overcome, that we conquer, and then we reflect those in our writing.
Absolutely. So you mentioned about the challenges. You mentioned about, there are different things that we take up and we put it in our character. I would like you to talk about how you thought of Mencius. What was the first interaction with your character Mencius and how you crafted that character?
So well, I just looked at myself. I thought that I could make a character out of myself I could reflect upon, and then I still relate with Mencius. Well, I put the backdrop in China. I don't know why I thought of that. I think I was influenced by the Dragon Warrior movies and the movies of the Panda and Kung Fu and everything. So that's why I put the backdrop in China, and then I found out a really good history of the Imperial Song Dynasty, and then it all went into a treasure hunt. Yes. And Mencius is also fascinated by history and clues and solving riddles. I'm also fascinated by that. So
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you're very fascinated by riddles. Do you also solve riddles in real life? How does that come into the character?
So I keep on researching on historical backdrops and mysteries that humanity has encountered, like in the like in history. So there are a few of them: the Amber Room, the Ark of the Covenant, the treasures that the Nazis plundered from all across Europe, which are still not found.
Yeah.
So like I go on on one day I eat Wikipedia, and then I try to solve that mystery. I try to find out possible locations for that particular like object, and I just love that sort of treasure hunt.
Yes. Do you remember when we were discussing the first part of the book, you used to tell me so many, historical important points or cultural aspects about different parts of, where Mencius was traveling through.
Yes.
So, where does that research comes from? Like, there's a lot of, richness in terms of your writing. There's a lot of factual richness also. How much do you research to write what you have written?
So like it all starts from like one single thing that I've read about in on the internet, and then I start eating it, and I like the facts inside, and then I research on Wikipedia for quite a few days, I think 3 or 4 weeks, and then I think that I can fit this somewhere in my book.
Okay.
Because the facts, they're intriguing and they're exciting, and
Right.
like it's like Dan Brown, who's my favorite author, by the way.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you spend a lot of time reading the facts, taking up from there. How do you also filter what to put in the book and what not to put in the book? Like what is true and not true? How do you validate those facts? Or do you take up something and build fiction around it? How do you think about it?
There's concrete evidence at some points, and like on at others there's just rumor. So like there's this rumor about the Nazis having an object that defies gravity. So
Yeah.
like there's not much evidence about that, but when you think about a treasure from the Imperial Song Dynasty or something, then it can actually be factual enough to add into a book. And then I start finding places where I can hide the riddles, places that point to a such treasure being in existence.
So you do validate those facts. You
Yes,
read it once
definitely.
and then you do validate it, from multiple sources.
Yes.
Okay. Now, speaking of the process of writing, okay, you're already like कि कितना पूछेगी मुझसे एक दो बार तो वो मुझे look दे चुका है. You good? We'll keep on continuing.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So the next thing that I want to ask you is about the writing process. ठीक है. अभी story है, आपने उसको सोचा. You did your research around that story, but how do you put it in words? What is your writing process like?
Well, I just start, and then I just keep building my story around it. I don't create a format at first, but then once the story starts building in my mind, I'm like sort of I'm on the brink of being clear and unclear about what will happen ahead. But then I
Yes.
just go with the flow.
Okay, interesting. Now we've discussed about your writing process. You go with the flow. Okay. Tell us about both the books. Give a little plot about the first part and then the second one.
So the first part is the Dragon Scroll. So it's basically on a historical backdrop. So it starts with a description of Imperial Song Dynasty of China, and a particular Han emperor called Han. He tries to attack it,
Yes.
and they're in jeopardy. So what they do is they hide their secret treasure, which is the real treasure of China.
Yeah.
So what they do is the king entrusts the treasure to one of his close friends and ministers, whose name is Cheju Shen. And he hides it somewhere, and he flees to Constantinople, where his cover is finally blown, and he's caught by spies who are trying to locate that treasure. But in the end, he's able to run away, and he successfully like hides the treasure from all danger. But then he creates a map called the Dragon Scroll. There are no dragons in the book, so don't
Correct.
be
Did
so-
somebody ask you
Yes.
looking at the cover?
Yes, somebody asked me in the book launch also that there are dragons in the book, because it's there in the name, it's there on the cover page, and like they have this perspective that if a child is writing a book, then it has to have something supernatural, but
Yeah.
that's not necessary. So
True, that's a point.
So then the dragon scroll, it has cryptic verses which lead to a certain treasure.
Yes.
And it's passed down the lineage. And then little Mencius, he gets it one day, and again their cover is blown. And then the story builds up on that, how he tries to like finally, you know, solve the riddles and find the treasure.
Yes.
And then at the same time, he's dodging attacks from an evil king, some goons, spies, and bad people.
Yes, so you've paused the first part at a very interesting point. Talk about breaking free, the second part to it.
So that's around a more serious topic, which is a very big problem today. It's forced labor. So slavery, as we know it, ended and was abolished in all the countries from the mid 16th to the mid 19th century.
Correct.
But that's not true, because slavery lives on.
Yes.
And I've researched a lot about this. I verified this. Forced labor, slavery, it still goes on in a lot of parts of the world, and slaves are auctioned off, which is like, it's the oldest inhuman act that humanity knows.
Correct.
So it's like, it's really bad, because a person owning another person, buying them, that's like, it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
So what Mencius does is he encounters slavery. He sees what's happening. He sees the criminal acts that are going on. And then he tries his best to fight them, to abolish slavery once more. And then he ignites a noble uprising against slavery, and then they fight for their rights, for the human rights that God has given us all.
That's quite interesting. So, would it be wrong that you are trying to take the different terrains, different social aspects with Mencius's eye? Because you mentioned that Mencius is also a lot of who Arya is. So, is it also that whatever you think about, or whatever you feel is a problematic aspect, you do want to call it out in the writing?
Yes. So there are certain problems in our society, chinks in our armor, which we need to like eliminate before we can move forward and develop more.
Absolutely, that's very true. So, speaking of slavery, you mentioned that you researched, you discussed. Did you also look at the historical aspect of it? You mentioned a lot about the history of slavery as well.
Yes.
I remember there's one book written by Toni Morrison. She's written a book named Beloved, and when you talk about slavery, that book is one of the key books in the history in terms of slavery. So even she mentions this in the first part of her book, Arya, that this has been going on for these many years doesn't mean this is acceptable. So I think that's something that you believe in as well.
Yes.
So how did you research about it? What was your thought process with it?
So like it all began with me researching a bit about modern slavery, and then I went into the ancients. So I found out that so many civilizations, they had those slaves, and the biggest like revenue was generated by slaves, because that's basically not even cheap labor, it's free labor, unless you're buying a slave for eternity. And then the atrocities that the people committed on the slaves, they were really bad, and they were inhuman. So apparently the first country to abolish slavery was Haiti.
Yes.
So they led a really good rebellion against their slave owners, and they made their country free. But then the fact is that slavery never actually stopped. It kept growing, but in the dark, shrouded in mystery and secrets. So you see the transatlantic slave trade, which forms a very dark web across the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
You see the slaves being shipped off, African tribals being lured with dreams of civilized lives, and then they're turned into slaves. And then they're packed like cows inside ships, and then they're sold away to like distant lands.
Correct.
And that also caused racism, which is a problem today. That also caused poverty. These civilizations, these kingdoms were very rich before they were like exploited for their labor.
Correct.
So that it's still causing a lot of problem today, which we need to like abolish.
That's true. I think whatever goes on today has its root in the past. A lot of things that are current issues would have something to do with the past. Do you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Okay, interesting. So, when I was talking about the fact that I learn a lot from him, this is exactly what I was discussing about. There are so many cultural aspects that I have learned through both the books. And Arya, you have also studied culture, specifically in the first book. We've had the character going to from one place to the other. How do you describe the culture? Like a lot of writers, when we meet them in the book, in the book workshops, they ask this question that I haven't been to a place. How do I define that place? So, how do you think about it?
So I imagine I'm there. I research so much about it, like every single word, like that describes that place, so that I can actually imagine that those walls are around me, that I'm in
Yeah.
a slave ship, or else like I'm being shipped off to distant lands. I'm being separated from my mother and father. I'm becoming a slave. I'm being whipped. Like that actually brings out the emotion. And then if you talk about the culture, then there is a thing that connects them. You look at the Silk Route, which was mentioned in the first book. It connects all the places that the clues are on. You look at Alexandria, you look at Xi'an, you look at Jordan. All of them are connected by a particular route. So the intermingling of the cultures, it transcends natural boundaries. So,
absolutely, it does. It does. So, speaking of the background of whatever you are putting in the cultural description, if you had to give any two tips to writers who haven't visited a place but they are writing about it, what would it be?
well, eat it in every single resource that writes about it, where you can read about it. You need to research so much, then you can like actually be there without actually being there.
That's such an interesting point. That's absolutely a very interesting point, that eat the place, the culture that you are writing about. So as we speak about the books, as we speak about editing the book as well, I mean, writing is a brilliant process, it's a dream world, but editing is where a lot of realism comes into play. So how do you edit your work? What's your thought about editing?
Okay, I never give editing rights, like unless you really, really ask for it. So
That is true. That is true.
I first give only suggesting rights, and I always decline things that I find very irrelevant. So, like there was this thing that all the countries mentioned, they are giving into stereotypes. But then I've researched about it. It's very factual that about some particular countries had a lot of slavery inside. So. I would love to include that. I don't want to change all.
Yes, I remember this point very clearly. So, yes, I think that's also something, as authors we can learn. And, this is something which we can absolutely be proud about. I always say that whoever is editing the book, be it world's best editor, the ownership of the final content stays with the author. So, you completely agree with it, isn't it? So, like after you've written, does the script goes to mom, dad, somebody you share it with, or is it that you edit it first and then somebody else comes in the picture?
So my writing buddy is my dad. He's my greatest critic. So like he's the only person I can rely on to give the most honest reviews. I mean, my mom can be a bit biased because it's my book, but then my dad will be very clear. So if he doesn't like it, he doesn't like it, and that's very helpful. So whenever we edit something, then we do it together. He helps me out, and then we read it together so that he can give me his insights into the book.
Very interesting. I think that's a wonderful process to follow across. Arya, as we also talk about feedback, as writers, people sometimes get a little bogged down by feedback. Have you ever thought of it in a manner that somebody told you, Arya, I didn't enjoy the book? How do you take negative criticism? Then I'll come to the positive one.
I like negative criticism. One of the reasons that I like to publish the book and sell it is because I want negative criticism, because like that's what helps me become a fully fledged author, a better author. That's what helps me bring out my best talents, and then it can help me eradicate the problems in the book. So honest critics, like, thank you. A big shout out for anyone who's like actually honestly reviewing the book.
Okay, and how do you deal with good and positive feedback? And I'll tell you why I'm asking you. Sometimes if we are writing something and somebody tells us something that, yaar, Arya, you're the best writer out there, do you feel that I'm going to create my own world, or do you not let it come to you? Like, how do you take both sort of feedback from readers?
So I let my roots pierce deep into the ground so that my branches can scrape the sky. But then good feedback is always good.
Yes, it is. That's so beautifully put up, bro. I think that kind of summarizes the discussion totally with our author, and that also, reminds me of our introduction. So when Arya talks about, his writing, his, research, as you said, the roots are right there. So all of that is something a lot of writers can also learn from. We do workshops. People are confused about what the plot should be, what the character should be doing, how the narrative should go ahead, what should I put, what should I not put. I think in this discussion, we've really tried to put out all the answers to those questions, isn't it?
Yes.
So everyone who's looking at writing a book, there's a lot of things that you can learn from this interesting discussion. So I think, Arya, you want to say any concluding note to everyone, or is it just ki chalo ab book pad lena, bye?
Yeah, bye.
So Arya, what's next?
Well, I can't tell you much, but there's gonna be a third book, and I'm planning to write a trilogy. So stay tuned for a finale, and I promise that I'll try to make it as more intriguing and exciting as I can. And I have this gut feeling that might be my magnum opus, but then I might even make better masterpieces.
Absolutely, you will. Absolutely, you will.